Hi, I'm Kristen. I'm the author of The Age of the Child.
Hi, I'm Lenora. I'm the creator of The Bitchy Bookkeeper.
Hi, I'm Isabel, founder and firebrand of the Uprising Spark, and we're the 3 founding non-mothers of Childfree Girls. And today we have a very special guest with us, Maxine Trump. She is the director of the documentary To Kid or Not to Kid. Welcome, Maxine. We're very happy to have you here with us.
Thanks so much. I'm really happy to be here. And it's so lovely because it's Friday night for me. And so I couldn't imagine spending my Friday night with 3 better females to talk about all things child-free. So it's exciting.
Yay.
Awesome.
So right before we started recording this, Lenora was about to ask you something. Well,
I just wanted to offer our congratulations to you for the fantastic job of the documentary To Kid or Not to Kid. For me, it was broadcasted on CBC, like on a TV channel here in Canada, which is huge because the next couple of days I was getting emails from relatives going, so there is this documentary about this woman who didn't want to have kids. Have you seen it? I'm like, yes, I have seen it. And we're getting to know her. So, it was, that alone is just awesome and cool. And I'm really excited for you and for the child-free community to see this, and hopefully this inspires so much more. We're going to get into that, but I just wanted to say that off the top. So I'll ask my question later.
But I think it's a great way to start because that was exactly the reason of making this film, to be able to start this dialogue in a way that makes it seem so normal. It can be just a casual conversation. Somebody can just say, literally, as you just put it, I wanted people to say, have you seen this film? Let me talk to you about it. And it's such an icebreaker because, as you all talk about a lot, and as I've been talking about a lot over the years, it should not have, this decision should not be loaded or have any taboo, because if 25% of us are not going to have kids, we should, this is part of society's decision making, and there's nothing abnormal about it. So that makes me super excited. And yeah, it was fantastic for CBC in Canada to take the film and show it, nationwide, which was super exciting.
That's great. So I had the pleasure, I don't know if the audience knows, I think I mentioned this, we actually made an episode about the documentary itself. Like, we discussed it among us.
I did watch that.
Awesome.
And you still came on the show, so that's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you were not, you were great about it. So yeah.
I really, really enjoyed it. I had the opportunity to meet Maxine in person in New York. And this was when that was the premiere of your documentary in New York. So that was the showing. And you had some guests with you there, and it was really fun to see all these people come together and support you at that moment. And of course, meeting you personally, that was a lot of fun. I wanted to ask you, what has happened since then, since I last saw you?
Yeah, so much, gosh. And it was so fantastic that you could be there. It was so serendipitous that all happened when you were in New York for the weekend. It's it was meant to be, right? So that was fantastic. The press were amazing. They gave us great reviews. We're currently at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. So keep the good, so that's really exciting. Thank you. Yeah. Because obviously people go there, they see how it's doing, and that makes them decide whether or not to watch the film, right? So that was brilliant. And then the press has kind of kept on snowballing from there. We also screened in LA for a week, and was in the LA Times and the New York Times. There's been a lot of coverage about the film now, which again, for all of us, brings this conversation to a normality, a normal place, or a normalcy. That's what I should be, using as my mantra. And that just makes me super happy because, when you spend 5 years making a film, you want it to have an impact. And so it's been really, really exciting. And it's interesting talking to you right now because I'm in Brooklyn in New York, but I'm meant to be in the UK in cinemas doing Q&As right now. We were this week meant to have a really big premiere on Wednesday night. And needless to say, due to COVID, that was all cancelled. But we're working really hard we've just been doing some press, actually. I think we're going to be in Glamour magazine this weekend, which is, again, super exciting. So I was hoping, actually, to be able to say tonight to you all when we're doing our virtual premiere in the UK. But it takes a lot of planning, as you can imagine. And we've got a lot of partners that want to be involved, which is exciting. So yeah, for people watching your YouTube channel and listening to your podcast and all of your social media that you do, I'll be announcing that, I'm hoping, in the next week or so.
That's fabulous.
This is Zoom.
This is, I just, when you're talking and I'm feeling so excited, I just have this image of you kicking down the door for so many of us. I know that the child-free community has been around for a long time, and we're relatively new to this, to speaking publicly, but this is such a big thing. And to be, you're talking about Glamour magazine and you're talking about, all the worldwide press and stuff, and not just for vanity's sake, but for something that is so important, especially, to the four of us. We'll just talk about the four of us here. Like, it's such an important thing. And I just see you, like, kicking down those doors. It's like, okay, great. Like, more people are going to be inspired to speak on a big scale about this, and it's nice that you're getting the great feedback, the great reviews, and people are welcoming you. It was the Today Show that you were on. And watching. Okay, I should have looked at this before we started, but was it Al Roker that asked you, what if you change your mind?
Yeah.
I remember the look.
You got bingo at the Today Show?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And Maxine was on. I wanted to watch it live, but the impeachment was going on. I mean, Trump, we'll get out. I won't maybe bring that up, but the impeachment kind of preempted it. So I saw it on Facebook. And I watched it twice. I was watching your reaction to the questions they were asking you, and I was watching their reactions to what you were saying. And the two men, they didn't say anything, but the looks on their faces kind of when you're like, well, it's kind of a done deal for me. And, yes, thank you for asking the question, but people don't change their mind. And just, it was really interesting. Like, it's really cool that you're having these experiences and that you're talking about this subject and seeing the reactions of, Al Roker is kind of a famous person. Like, I know who he is. It's just interesting to see that interaction. And I don't know how did you feel in that situation, or not situation, but that instance there?
Yeah, I mean, of course, again, really excited that the Today Show thought that this was a subject that should be covered. It just goes to show, and I don't know for you all as well, but I've seen a real shift in the coverage of the subject now. When I first started making the film back in 2013, the whole reason I made the film is because there wasn't a film for me like this out there, and I really needed it. And there are a couple of books which were awesome, and thank goodness for the couple of books that were out there. But there really wasn't, I'm a documentary maker, and I was stunned that there wasn't a film about somebody making the decision about being child-free. Like, why wasn't there? And so now in the 5 years of seeing a shift, seeing more books written, more articles written, it's so exciting. And I'd actually been talking to the Today Show for a couple of years, surprisingly enough. And it took all this time, needless to say, I wanted to be on when people could watch the film, but it took them quite a long time to think that this would be a subject that would be interesting enough. And I think maybe once seeing the press coverage of the film and maybe seeing, as we're all seeing now, there's lots more magazine articles, lots of younger women are talking about it more. And I'm so grateful for them to be doing that and making, I think for the generation now behind me, I think it's on the table more than it ever was when I was kind of hiding about the fact I didn't want to have kids.
I remember them doing a short segment on the Today Show several years ago when Ann Curry was still on. And I was really excited that they were talking about it, but I was so disappointed by the way they edited the film for it, because they would be talking about women who didn't want to have children, but then they would intersperse the conversation about women who don't want to have children with like a picture of a playground in black and white with no children on the screens and some really, really sad music. And I was just like, what?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. I think we saw the same. I think we
Probably.
saw the segment. Yeah. And it's like, finally being able to sit there and talk about this in a way. And I didn't, it was very important to me to not go on feeling that I was like really being confrontational in any way, or like, because you're not winning, there's enough, I think, to get people to see your point of view is to talk calmly and be considered and hear what they have to say, and then counterbalance that with your opinions and your experience. And by speaking from experience as well, I think that can really help them see, okay, this is a woman who's really thought about this. She's not crazy or set or whatever the terms people want to throw our way and have thrown our way. I just didn't want to feed any fuel to that fire, because that's not our truth.
And so this is the reaction from the press, which I think is absolutely, it's great, because like you mentioned, having good reviews and people talking about it creates a buzz. And so more people are going to want to see your documentary, which is awesome. I'm more curious about what kind of fan mail have you received or not, in the media, like people like us. What kind of things have you been reading from them?
It was lovely yesterday. I had a guy who said, I'm really fanboying, as he was emailing me. And I was like, yeah, be my fanboy. I'm like, I want more men to like be going, yeah, this is awesome. So that was really lovely. So I'm going to be actually a Canadian podcast, I think next week. I'm going to do an interview with them. And it's just delightful, actually, the amount of male feedback I've had as well. And I think what was really on my heart in making the film was to make it really accessible to everybody. And, I was really trying hard to not make an us and them film. I wanted people to watch it and people be able to say, like you just did earlier, somebody to be able to say, oh, I saw this film, and I want it, rather than them going, I'm never going to tell, this is a film that doesn't speak to me in any way. And so I've had lots of parents actually come up to me and say, listen, I can't tell anyone about this, and I'm going to tell you because of how vulnerable you've been, but I regret having my kids. And I've had that more, that's not just happened once, that's happened a good few times. And that was a real surprise. I feel that there's been an opportunity for people to kind of talk about their pain. And when we first premiered in film festivals, needless to say, I had a lot of friends in at my first premiere, which was also in New York, but it was like the first time anybody from the general public had ever seen it. And there was lots of crying and laughter. It's a big deal for me that people can laugh while they're watching the film as well. And, people were feeling all of these different emotions, and people coming up to me afterwards and saying, I could see myself in the film. I could see myself reflected back, and then also could have a giggle about it. So it's really sort of ran the gamut. And, I could have made it more niche and like very specific to one particular audience. But I wanted this again to be a subject that parents could watch and say to non-parents, I've just seen this awesome documentary that I think appeals to you. And that was like a big part of my approach to the film. Do cut me off if I ever go on a little bit long to interject. I'm having a gin and tonic because it is like it's like for me. So cheers.
Oh, jelly.
I love a gin and tonic.
Me too.
No, it's okay. We all like to talk. That's the point. We like having conversations. So this is excellent. Less silence for us to edit out later.
Sorry. No, you go ahead.
Oh, sorry. See, now, okay. I was wondering, Maxine, what was probably one of the biggest challenges that you found, not filming per se, but just in dealing with just distribution? Or like you said, you were talking to the Today Show for two years about this. Was there another instance where that you found the most kind of like a hurdle you had to get through to either finish the film, or like specifically because of the topic you're talking about? What was the biggest?
I mean, it's still deemed for a lot of people a very controversial topic. Like for a lot of people, even though I tried to make it as accessible and as broad as possible, I had very famous documentary makers come up to me and go, "Oh, darling, I would just tell everyone they should all have children," and da-da-da. And it's just like those kind of responses I've still been stunned by, because, you know, if the Me Too movement or, you know, any of these movements that have come before us have said anything, it's all about women's choice being the priority. Like, this is what we're fighting for, is having freedom of choice. And then when a woman comes up to me and says, "Oh, darling, you know, I really think everybody should have kids," it's, you know, it's like,
what do you say? What is your response to that? Because I know in the documentary, someone would say something and it seemed like you would ask a question like, "Well, why do you say this?" Or don't you think, "Oh, I forget the name of the politician you were talking to, but you were asking him why is this your position? And don't you think this is kind of irresponsible?" So in those cases, when people would say stuff to you, did you just sort of la-di-da your way out of it, or like politely, or did you question them? Or,
well, I'm sure you've been finding this the same for you all as well. Like, once you have this kind of this body of material behind you, it's almost like this, it gives you this strength and this empowerment that if I walk away just kind of hiding again, I haven't come through this process of like ownership of this identity that I have. So I'll often counter or interject and say, even if people don't want kids, you think they should have them. And that's often like a really great kind of like, it turns it on, it turns the table to kind of go, how do you kind of respond?
Yeah, they probably have to process the whole notion of someone not wanting kids, because that doesn't, it's not part of, teaching.
It's almost like they think they're being cute by saying something like that, because, of course, I've heard that a million times. You know, it's kind of like a one-off and they don't think about it. But, yeah, saying that back makes them think, and maybe makes them think about saying that again to somebody else, which is kind of the point of why we do all of this, is to bring awareness, right? Like, it's a choice, and not everyone wants to have kids, and not everyone's going to have children. It's a choice.
Yeah.
But those comments are often more harmful than anything else. But people, the general population, they don't understand why or how. So it's really cool that, that's what you do.
Yeah. Well, I also, I think humor can be such a powerful force as well. And like I was saying, like, I really tried to find moments in the film where people could laugh, so I don't use humor as a barrier, but I also try and I don't want this big cloud of a weight around this decision, because it shouldn't have to have that. And so by people watching my film or getting to know me or interviewing me or chatting to me or whatever, they quite often will find this sort of part of my personality that's like, well, let's just talk about it, because, or learn from my mistakes. Like, talk about your decision with your husband before you get married to them, or your, partner, or, if you're not in a heterosexual couple, it's like, or if you're single, talk to your family about whatever. So that if it can be more lighthearted, I'll go to the more lighthearted response first, because I think that's a way that you can kind of win people over as well. But when somebody kind of comes up with something quite shocking, then I'll offer a considered response that makes them think, or at least I try to. I don't always get it right, but yeah.
I have a question regarding, so I know your sister is like one of your biggest fans, and she's in the documentary as well, and you have your nephews there. So what did they think about the film?
My sister loves it. My sister, I mean, you talked about some of the challenges. I think some of the biggest challenges when you're making a film for 5 years is trying to have, and when it's a personal film like this, is trying to have a camera on you all the time and recognizing when you can pick it up and put it in front of your family when it's like not a natural situation. But my sister, you know, let's be really honest here. My sister gets the best of me because I can be the brilliant auntie because I don't have kids. And again, we've all heard all of that, right? Like what we bring to each other from the different sides of the equation can be really empowering again. So she's been awesome. She's like got a sister that's been able to be there. She was a single mum for a really, really long time. So I was able to come alongside her in that. So it's been kind of, you know, a mixture, and not all of my family have seen it yet because they're in the UK, and it's been very focused in the release in Canada and the US. And like I said, we were meant to be releasing it now, which was going to be really interesting because so many of my friends in the UK were going to see it. And, you know, anything when you're putting yourselves out there, like, I mean, there must have been a process for you all as well. You know, you're on camera, you're being quite vulnerable, and you have to be quite brave in that, don't you? For all of you too, you know, you're doing this weekly and you're talking about subjects that, you know, for people to watch it, you're going to go deep and be a little controversial or go to a place where people don't always go. And you're like, okay, hands holding on here. Let's see how it goes down. But so far there hasn't been. My biggest fear, and a lot of friends were warning me about this, is like the backlash from people that would be giving me a really, really hard time about my decision. And so far, touch wood, so far so good. But I'm preparing myself for that as well, because at the moment like I said, we're only in North America, and we'll see how the rest of the world takes the film.
I think you get to the point, though, where you're like, you know what, I'm ready to talk about this. And it's not that criticism doesn't hurt, especially from friends and family, but you get to a point in your life where you're like, you know what, this means something to me. I feel compelled to share it. My best friend, last week we were chatting, and she's like, do you ever get afraid that, you know, someone's going to say something or comments? And I said, well, if I did this 10 years ago, well, I wouldn't have done it 10 years ago because I just was not ready. Like, being on camera I'm not comfortable, hence the wigs. But, you know, I mean, you would think because I don't mind talking, but it's the visual aspect I'm not comfortable with. But I'm at a point now where I'm okay. I'm not worried about criticism when and if it does happen. Like, it's okay because the message is important to me enough that I can bypass all the other stuff. And it's important to me now at this particular age and time in my life where I really strongly feel the urge to talk about this subject. So I imagine, like, for you, you're like, you know what? I mean, doing a documentary is like, I mean, that's a whole other ball game. So you're not half-assing that stuff. You know, this is huge. I
had the solidarity of the three of you. Like, you know, I think what's so great, and I think what's so smart about what you've done with the YouTube series is that you have each other as well, and bouncing ideas off each other and like working together. It's like, it's a really great unit. So, you know, well done for like coming up with this idea. I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
I wondered if I could add, you were just talking about being personal and being vulnerable. And there's something I've been dying to know since watching your documentary, and I watched it twice. And I talked about this in the episode that we did where we talked about your film. And there was a moment where you're sitting out in the yard with your husband and you were talking about, you know, he mentioned something about it being the rest of your lives with no kids. And then he said something like, well, there's still time to adopt. And I really want to know what you felt in that second, hearing that possibility was still open to you.
You know, if I'm really, really honest, I'd never seen anybody, again, like, this is why I'm so excited about the times we're living in, like, right now. And I mean, literally, like, you know, the changes that have happened just in the last few years. I wasn't seeing anyone reflected back at me in society. I knew nobody that hadn't had children. And so I was kind of floundering. I didn't really I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't know myself particularly well enough. And hats off to, one woman who's in the film that knew since she was the age of 12. It just never came up for me. I never thought about it. So in that kind of showed me that surely if I wasn't dreaming about it, then I don't want kids. But I couldn't really sort of articulate it. So it wasn't as big a shock as maybe some people watching the film, because I think my husband was also trying to work out what he was wanting too, and have these conversations again. Really learn from what you're watching when you watch the film. Don't leave it as long as I did. Thank goodness we've come through the other side, but it's really, really important to have these conversations. But it's kind of funny because you were asking me about some of the responses I've had to the film, and some people have. I always say learn but from my mistakes, and a lot of people have come back to me and said, we did exactly the same thing beforehand. And I'm like, oh, good, at least it's not just me. But again, if people see this decision as much more normal and something they can choose, then they won't make those mistakes and they won't, have an accidental pregnancy.
I don't think, for some reason, there's so little awareness of how it's kind of the most important thing to not bring unwanted people into a life where they're not wanted. I mean, that's everything. If you look at human life as the end all be all, as many humans do, I don't. But if we're talking about people and what's important in our lives, having one is pretty critical. And if you're going to have one, it should be where you're wanted and where you're going to be loved and where someone's actually thought about your presence in this world, and not, well, I was kind of pressured and or suckered and or trapped into having you, so here you are.
Yeah, totally. And we're all talking the same language, aren't we? Which is lovely, because it's such a, I'm not always talking to people when I do interviews with people that totally and utterly get it. So it's really nice to kind of go, yeah, you all get it. There's no, I don't have to be saying anything new to you. You've all heard it. You've all talked about it a million times. And this is just, you're approaching it from a different angle by doing this, working really hard, doing this weekly series and your podcasts as well, which that's going to be exciting to hear. I know, Isabel, you have your own podcast, and then you're doing the podcast together, all of you, right?
Yeah, we're trying to spread the word as far as we can because, like you mentioned, it is really about choice. We're not trying to convince anyone to be child-free. We're just trying to let people know that they have a choice. Yeah. And when you were just talking now about, how people are very, self-conscious when they think about, I'm child-free, but should I tell people, if I start dating, when is it a good time to tell this person that I want to have kids? I've heard many stories of people sacrificing, in a way, that choice because they'd rather be with someone than be alone and not, you know what I mean? But there's two things. There's the fact that they don't want to be alone. So they want to be with someone, and this other person wants kids. So they're like, okay, I'm just going to do it, even though they don't want kids. And then that happens. And there's also people who think that there aren't a lot of us out there. And we actually are a lot. It's just that people are not too vocal about it. And I think we need to be more out there,
Totally. I could not agree with you more. The more that we aren't kind of hiding behind, as I was, I just wasn't bringing it up, so then I knew no one would ask me. And now I'm so loud and proud about it. I'm definitely not going into parties and going, "Hi, I'm Maxine, I'm child free." I want to make friends.
I do that. It's totally okay. That's the second thing that comes out of my mouth. "Hi, I'm Lenora, I'm child free." Because I have business, I have blogs to promote. I have, that's why it's now a business. So I want people to come after me with it.
But Leonora, just, all of you actually, just to jump off what you were saying, I'm still surprised that I'm still learning new things about this, because I was at an event. There was an event in New York, and of course, anything about child free I get invited to, which is awesome. And there were some men there that were talking about the fact their wives, again, we're talking about heterosexual couples here, talking about how their wives actually didn't want kids and they encouraged them to have children. And I would love to do some studies actually on the amount of women that didn't want to have children. And, you know, and the more we can share about childcare duties and how it's definitely not 50-50, that we're still stuck in the dark ages somewhat with the childcare that men will do. And today, you know, one of my, you know, most exciting or the most kind of reactions I've had to a post in a few weeks is about single women. And I shared a post today. Upworthy did this lovely piece about, there's a neuroscientist called Paul Dolan, which I think you've all probably heard about his book, which was his book. He's based out of the UK, the London School of Economics, and his book was talking about happiness indexes and how single women that don't have kids and aren't married are in certain studies have been reported as the happiest women. And I think, yeah, right. And I posted that today, and that's been one of the biggest responses, you know, on Facebook for my posts in the last couple of weeks. And, you know, we've got to share all of this, all of us, like, talking about whatever situation we're in. And one of the things I was super excited about after the featured doc was PBS, which, you know, those of us based in America know very well that it's kind of the BBC of America, and they paid for me to do a spin-off web series, and the web series allowed me to take this decision kind of much further into what do we think about surrogacy, what do we think about gay couples, and also talking about people that are childless and coming through to a point in their lives where they can actually own the term child-free, which just makes me so happy for them because they did want kids. So it's allowed me to explore the topic even further because my film, you know, I'm a white, British heterosexual woman. And although I go and talk to many other people, it's fundamentally, you know, me coming out and finding my voice and my identity. And so that was super exciting. The PBS series was great. And just allows us to kind of go, are some of these decisions right too? You know, how long should you do IVF for? Like, why can't we just kind of say, if you can't have kids, that's not a taboo subject either. You wanted kids and you can't have kids, own that as well, and like talk about that too. So that was really, really exciting because PBS is generally seen as a little bit more conservative sometimes in their programming. And so that was super exciting.
I love the one where you had the Mormon man with the I don't know if she was a single woman. I can't remember.
Yeah, single Kelly. Yeah.
I love that just because it's such a, you know, it's so different and just, that was fabulous. It's amazing how when you start speaking out about your own journey, how you come across the different nuances to being child-free or childless, because I never once considered someone who was going through infertility and then saying, you know what, maybe I don't need to have a kid. And then, like you said, embracing child-free. I've met a number of them, and there's a huge community actually on Instagram that are, you know, child-free after infertility. And I never once considered that approach. And, you know, because it wasn't my journey, but there's so many different elements. And then you talk about, you know, people in the Black community and, you know, there's so many. And for me, like, I'm like a half Black Canadian there's Black couldn't even tell you what that is. So I've learned a lot from child-free Black women in the States that have a completely different experience culturally. And it's just really cool to, it's opened me up, and as probably for you too, like just seeing the different nuances to being child-free. Like, it's just not cookie cutter at all. Yeah. So, you know, the more stories that are featured and that are out, you know, that even better, because then there's going to be somewhere someone's going to identify with one of them. You know.
Yeah. One what I loved about that episode you talked about is that the young woman's also bisexual. And so she was able to kind of bring that to the table. And then we had a lovely Jamaican woman and Mexican woman, and the Mexican young woman talked about how like she couldn't talk at all about the fact she had an abortion when she was young, and she was, you know, is really trying to find her identity as being a child-free woman. And when you come from a Catholic background, or, you know, I mean, I know you all come from like different areas of the States and Colombia, and that's really exciting too. You have this opportunity to be bringing people on that tell very unique stories, and yeah, it's like the more people are talking about this from their different communities, the more exciting it is, I think. Yeah, I agree.
I would really love to see an exploration of the wives of the men who said their wives didn't want kids and they convinced them to have them. Because as soon as you said that, I just seriously felt the most depressed pit in my stomach. And I think it is, you know, people make such a big deal and have so much sympathy for women who desperately want children, not women who think they have to have them, but women who desperately want children and they can't conceive. And for some reason they either can't or don't adopt. But you know, that's considered a big tragedy. But someone who doesn't want a child being coerced into motherhood is just kind of like no big deal. But it just seriously, it's so sad. It's so tragic and people don't get it.
Yeah. I'm so pleased. I had exactly the same response. I was like, what are you talking about? And again, there's the reports of like, if you're in a heterosexual couple, you are going to be, as the woman, doing most of the childcare. So be prepared for that. And like, if the guy is saying, I really want you to have kids, it's like, I almost want a contract. You know, my husband said to me, listen, because I would always laugh saying, I want to be the dad. I want to be the one sitting back in like what I call deck chairs. It's like, you know, sitting back with my can, watching the sports, letting my husband run after the kids while I'm just sitting there chatting with the guys, and and like society's not ready for me to do that. So I was like, I'm sorry, but thank you so much for that offer. I love you dearly for the fact that you'd offered that I could be the dad, but I know there's no way society would look at me and think of me as a bad mother. And yes, I would have been a bad mother. That's why I'm not having kids.
Yeah, we're very far from that becoming a reality. I think there are couples that are really progressive and really modern, and you can see the father's actually being very hands-on, but that's a minority. I mean, patriarchy is still hovering on top of most of our heads, and especially in very traditional quote unquote societies, like for example Latin America, I would say. And
how are you finding it, Isabel? Like, it's so easy for me being from England and now sort of in the States, but where you are, very Catholic. It's a hugely Catholic country, and I can imagine the pressures just being through the roof. So how is it for you, and how are you kind of embracing your identity in your community?
Well, at the beginning it was hard. I think everyone in the Childfree community finds it hard at the beginning to kind of own that, and at the same time be able to not really defend it, but sort of just shake off whatever comes your way, because you're going to get pressure not only from your family, but your friends, your peers, your partner, if you're in a relationship and they want kids. I think owning it is a big part, of course, but for me, it's being completely unapologetic about it. It's really literally learning how to give zero fucks about what other people think about me. There's no other way to do it. Absolutely no other way. Yeah.
And when you give zero fucks, the friends then that are around you are then your true community, aren't they? I think it was hard for me, and it's so individual, right, for all of us. But I definitely was surrounded by friends that were going through infertility issues, and it was very hard for me to then, I had to be careful about how I framed it. But now, because I've been so loud and proud about it, it's kind of great. I feel like once you're able to really own that identity and people know it, then it's sort of like everybody just knows it now. And it's like, it doesn't have to be, it's like, okay, you've made this documentary. Okay, you've got this web series. Okay, you've got this podcast. This is part of your identity. And then so there doesn't have to be any couching of like any fear of upset, because this is, they know this about you. Yeah, so the earlier you can own it. And I think people are now, you know, slowly but surely in certain communities, definitely in a number of urban areas in New York for sure. You know, Leonora, I know you were being told like at times, why are you still having to have this conversation about this? Like, who cares? You know, why is this such an issue? And I've definitely heard that too. But as we know, there are many communities that it's a huge issue for. And you know, if 1 in 9 women are suffering from postnatal depression, then it's like, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? You just reminded me of something. And I think it's important to also, like, if I could give people listening to this, one small piece of advice is don't try to judge beforehand what people are going to say to you when you tell them you're child free, because you're going to be surprised. Some people that you think are going to be very supportive are actually not. And in my case, one of the people around me that I thought was going to be like completely unsupportive and she was going to tell me off or whatever, a good friend of mine from school, from always. When I first told her about, and I started telling her I'm child free with the fact that I had gotten my tubes tied. So this was a big thing, right?
Congratulations on getting your tubes tied, by the way.
Thank you. So it was a big thing. And the first thing was like, she was shocked. She was like, oh my God. But then I started talking to her, and 5 minutes literally into the conversation, she was like, I wish I would have thought about this before I had my kid. So that was, you know, it was a completely 180, and it took me by surprise. So, you know, try to come into those conversations with an open mind.
I think that's great advice. I couldn't have said it better myself, because I think I think we've seen some of the reactions, and it can make us fearful. But I think I totally agree with you. My experience now has been such pleasant surprise, and I'm telling everybody that I haven't had this terrible backlash again about the film. Like, it really hasn't been that. And I think the more we can kind of say to people, listen, it won't be that bad. At least I hope it won't be that bad. It's can be really surprising, the amount of people, like you say, having that great response from your friends. It can end up becoming, you can have these delightful conversations that you would have never had before if you hadn't talked about it. So yeah, it's great.
As you said earlier, you approached this film not in a confrontational way, which I've learned from personal experience makes a huge difference when you're talking about the fact that you are child free and why. Because when I was 22 when I made the decision for myself, or when I realized I had a choice. Like, I knew I didn't want to have kids, but it just felt inevitable. And then 22, the light bulb went on, like, oh, wait a second, people can choose. You know what? I'm not going to have kids. And it was a place of peace for me. And so I've always tried to approach it, even content-wise, approach it from a peaceful place and from like a loving place. So then I'm not putting out that angry energy. I mean, of course, I've had, you know, some angry conversations, but overall, you know, I think when however you voice your decision, and whether you're just talking to someone or you're producing content or whatnot, like, however you're feeling inside comes out and will bring back to you, you know, what you're putting out. Like, if there's a lot of angry child-free content out there, and then there's a lot of angry pushback because of it, I mean, we've all seen it, right?
Yeah.
But like your documentary, and even how I've seen you handle the interviews, has come from a very strong place, but a very good place where it's like you're happy, you are secure in your decision, and that probably makes a huge difference too with the feedback that you get. Because then you're inviting those conversations, which I've also noticed the conversations I've had with other parents has gotten a lot deeper, because we talk about the realities of parenthood. And I've also heard a lot, not necessarily that they've regretted, I've had a few of those, but also they're going, yeah, I kind of wish I thought about it a bit more. You know, and these are mostly from older women, actually, like 15 up, that, you know, that time there was no not having kids for the most part, right?
Yeah,
so,
totally. Because they would prefer people to think they couldn't have kids because they didn't want the backlash than actually saying, I've decided not to have kids. But I just got chills from you just telling me that. Like, I love it. I get so excited when I hear these great responses because I think it's so encouraging. And you all, like, putting this out there week by week, it's bound to change the conversation, and that's all we're talking about, right? It's just and how that it can add to our experience of life. Like you were just saying, you have richer, deeper conversations because of this. I mean, that's just kind of delightful. You're having these richer experiences, and actually, we're all on lockdown at the moment for the most part. I mean, I'm on serious lockdown being in New York City, and it's been kind of fascinating thinking about deeper conversations because I'm having longer conversations with friends and I think the opportunities that we can do when we can go and have these deeper conversations, I think are fantastic situations for then people to see from both sides and kind of leave that conversation both having learned a lot from different experiences. But thank you for pointing out my approach of wanting to be inclusive and I know many people have had really upsetting exchanges. They've been kind of cut out of their family's wills, the pressure that's been put on them to have kids. It's super heartbreaking, and my heart goes out to those people in a big way. And I also want to say, like, we're coming alongside you too, because that pain is a big deal. I don't know whether you posted this bumper sticker on your Facebook pages or Instagram, but there was a bumper sticker that I saw this week on one of the Childfree posts that it was a grandma saying, my daughter's still selfishly keeping my grandkids in her womb.
I saw that somewhere.
Yeah. It may have been you, Kristen, that posted it then. But that there's that pain out there, and what we're doing by talking about it and making it seem more normal is hopefully those people are feeling unafraid by us being the community around them. And my biggest hope with this film is that people can send, when I was running my Kickstarter, I offered an anonymous link to the film to be sent out to people. It would just arrive in their inbox and it would just be a link to the film, and people would then watch it if they were the person that was putting the pressure on somebody to have kids, and just to see if they would bring it up with them. But they didn't need to know it was being sent from them. It was totally coming from us. So, it's like a way to kind of like, let's see it, and I really do feel, I get people asking me all the time, like I've sent out a couple of kind of links to people just to help them, like before, early days. I want people to feel supported by watching this film. And so anytime I can, I've sent out a couple of links that I should have sent out just so I could get it to people because, early, because they were really deep in this like dark place of trying to make a decision with their partner or their parents or blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of, it is exciting. And I hope for you all that might be in different places where, I'm lucky to be in Brooklyn and New York and not seeing, I'm part of a lot of meetup groups, but you may be seeing it more in conversations and hearing that pain. I don't know, but I know there is change, and I want it to be really hopeful for those people that are still struggling to be able to talk about it. Sorry, I kind of went on a little bit then, but I get kind of emotional about this stuff.
No, it's great. It's awesome. Yeah. Passion is everything, right? Kristen actually wanted to say something.
Oh.
But it was just a quick thing based on what you all were saying about compassion and coming at this from a positive place. And I know a lot of child-free people get really upset about bingos. And I think if we look at bingos as genuine either curiosity or fear or insecurity about someone's own decision or pressure or whatever it is, if someone's asking you, why don't you want kids? Maybe it's really just curiosity because they don't know. If it's, aren't you afraid you'll regret it? Maybe they're afraid that if they make that choice, they'll regret it. So as as instinctive as it might be after so many years for a lot of child-free people to get kind of prickly at what we call bingos, if we maybe see them in a different way and just don't get angry about it or frustrated by it and just answer those questions genuinely, that might also help further the discussion and make them more comfortable or help them understand, or they'll just walk away, whatever. But it's could be a helpful approach with bingos.
I think that's a great way to look at it, because I do think people are still struggling to find how to talk about this without kind of using language that we might feel kind of uncomfortable about. And I think you're right, Kristen, if we kind of feel that it's a curiosity and can be an opportunity for us as well to kind of change people's minds or kind of, I don't always want to use the word educate because it seems so dry and kind of old fashioned, but it is kind of like spreading the awareness and acceptability. So I love that. Yeah, I think that's super important to like just see it as a place of people just don't know and are trying to find their own way through it.
I think it's a great way to close our episode, because unfortunately we're running out of time. But before we do the close, I wanted to ask you if there's something else you want to add to your interview before we end it.
No, I think if people want to watch the film and they're not in Canada or North America or the States, we are releasing the film very, very soon worldwide. So go to tokidornottokid.com. We post everything there. Sign up for our newsletter. You'll hear, as soon as we have announcements, you'll hear about it. And I really hope you enjoy the film. And if you enjoy it, let me know. Email me. I love hearing from people, or get in touch. Any of my social media platforms. I love hearing from you all. And I really hope your viewers enjoy the film as well. And thanks for having me on.
So to our audience listening to this episode or watching us on YouTube, we're going to leave all of Maxine's links to her website, to her social media handles in the description of this episode. And that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching.
If you'd like to send us an email, we love emails. We love questions, comments, or suggestions about what you'd like to see us talk about or listen to us talk about. You can reach us at childfreegirls@gmail.com.
And of course, you can follow us on our awesome social media, especially on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, TikTok, LinkedIn, but mostly Instagram.
See you next episode.
Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye, ladies.
Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Awesome.
Bye.
Have you ever responded with anger or frustration to a bingo and wish you might have approached it differently? Put your answer in the comments or email us or let us know some other way. Telepathy.